On the 26th of January 2020, the aviation world stopped. A Sikorsky S-76B helicopter carrying Kobe Bryant and 8 others slammed into a hillside in Calabasas, California. The weather was foggy. The pilot was a legend in the industry. The machine was state-of-the-art. In the hours that followed the crash, the internet was flooded with theories. The engine must have exploded. The tail rotor failed. It was sabotage. People simply could not accept that a machine so advanced, flown by a pilot as experienced as Ara Zobayan, could simply fly into the ground without a mechanical cause. Fast forward to the 18th of December 2025. We are witnessing the exact same cycle of denial with the Greg Biffle plane crash involving N257BW. In our last video, we discussed the biological trap of spatial disorientation. We explained how the pilot's brain likely tricked him into a graveyard spiral. But reading through the thousands of comments, I see the skepticism, I hear the doubt, don't blame the pilot before the report is out. What if the engine really did explode? What if the electrical system died and they lost their instruments in the dark? These are valid questions. They deserve respect, and more importantly, they deserve answers. But here is the hard truth about aviation investigation. We don't have to guess, because while human memory is flawed and witnesses are unreliable, metal does not hallucinate. Metal does not lie. Right now, NTSB investigators are performing what we call a wreckage autopsy on the debris of N257BW. They are looking for microscopic scars left on the aluminum and steel at the exact millisecond of impact. Today, on the Air Debrief, we are pivoting from the psychological to the physical. We are going to look at this crash through the lens of forensics. We will examine the light bulb test that proves whether the pilots were in the dark. We will decode the rotational bending of the turbines that reveals if the engines were alive. And we will uncover the chilling forensic similarities between the wreckage of N257BW and the tragedy of Kobe Bryant. The evidence is buried in the ash. Let's dig it out. To understand the final seconds of Dennis Dutton and Jack Dutton, we must first look at the scar they left on the Earth. In accident reconstruction, the impact crater tells us the kinematics of the crash, the energy state of the aircraft at the moment it died. Consider a stall or a flat spin. If N257BW had suffered a catastrophic engine failure and stalled, it would have fallen out of the sky relatively vertically. It would pancake. The wreckage would be contained in a small, tight radius. The vertical compression would be high, but the forward scatter would be low. But preliminary reports from Statesville indicate a high-energy impact field. The aircraft sheared off treetops and struck approach lights before impacting the ground. The debris field is likely elongated. This tells us something critical about the velocity. The aircraft was moving fast. If the engines had failed completely, the aircraft would be gliding at best speed around 100 to 120 knots. Instead, the fragmentation suggests the aircraft hit the ground with significant forward velocity, likely well above its maneuvering speed. This mirrors the Kobe Bryant crash perfectly. The Sikorsky helicopter didn't fall out of the sky, it was flown into the terrain at 184 miles per hour. Similarly, the Citation jet appears to have been under power, flown decisively into the ground. This rules out a structural breakup in midair. The plane was intact until it hit the trees. But this leads to the next objection. Okay, so they hit hard, but maybe they lost all electrical power? Maybe the cockpit went black and they couldn't see their instruments? It is a terrifying thought. But forensic science has a way to check the light switch, even after the light is smashed. This is one of the most fascinating and reliable techniques in aviation forensics: filament analysis. The Cessna Citation 550 N257BW is a legacy aircraft. Unlike modern jets with LED screens, its cockpit is filled with traditional annunciator panels, rows of tiny incandescent bulbs that warn of oil pressure, hydraulic failure, or generator loss. When the crash happens, the glass housing breaks. The cockpit is destroyed. But the tiny tungsten filament inside the bulb tells a story that survives the fire. Here is the physics. When a light bulb is on, the tungsten filament is heated to white-hot temperatures. It becomes soft, ductile, like molten taffy. If a violent impact happens while the light is on, the massive G-forces stretch that soft filament. It uncoils, it elongates, it drapes over the internal posts. Investigators call this hot stretch. However, if the light is off, the filament is cold. It is brittle. Upon impact, it doesn't stretch. It simply snaps. A clean, sharp, jagged break. Investigators call this a cold break in the JFK Jr. crash, another famous case of spatial disorientation. Investigators recovered the annunciator panel from the ocean floor. Under the microscope, they found hot stretch on the instrument panel lights. This proved scientifically that the electrical system was working until the millisecond of impact. JFK Jr. was not flying in a blacked-out cockpit. He had data, he just didn't trust it. In the Greg Biffle investigation, NTSB metallurgists will place the filaments from N257BW under a scanning electron microscope. If they find hot stretch, it proves the generators were running. It proves the battery bus was alive. It proves that if the pilots couldn't see the horizon, it wasn't because the lights went out. It was because their minds went dark. The blackout theory is likely a myth. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the audio, the rough engine, or some issues. Did the Pratt & Whitney JT-15D engines quit? Did they explode midair? The audio suggests an anomaly, but the wreckage acts as a forensic clock. We can tell exactly what the engine was doing at the moment of death. We look at the turbine blades. These blades spin at thousands of revolutions per minute. They are precision instruments. But when they hit the ground, they behave in two very different ways. Scenario A. If the engine is dead stopped when it hits the ground, the blades just stab into the dirt. They absorb the impact energy by bending backward longitudinally. They might snap, but they remain relatively straight. It looks like a static crush. Scenario B. If the engine is screaming at high RPM, producing high-power physics takes over. The spinning blades hit the earth, rocks, and trees while rotating at extreme speed. The force doesn't just bend them back, it shreds them against the casing. The blades curl in the opposite direction of rotation. They twist. They look like they have been put through a giant blender. In forensics, this is called rotational bending, or sometimes bambooing. In the Kobe Bryant crash, the NTSB found severe rotational damage on the engine rotors. The metal was twisted and scourged. This proved the engines were producing massive power at impact. Our Zobayan hadn't lost an engine. He was driving the helicopter into the ground under full power. We expect the NTSB to find the same signature on N257BW. If the blades are shredded and curled, it means Dennis Dutton was likely pushing the throttles forward. He was likely trying to go around, trying to climb away from the ground he thought was below him. And, as we learned in the last video, that rapid acceleration is exactly what triggers the somatogravic illusion, making the pilot feel like he's climbing steeply, causing him to push the nose down. So, was there a rough engine? Perhaps. Maybe a compressor stall, maybe a vibration. But rough does not mean failed. If the blades show rotational bending, it confirms that the engine power didn't fail them. In a tragic twist of irony, the engine power and the acceleration it provided likely helped seal their fate by reinforcing the illusion. Why do I keep comparing this to the Kobe Bryant crash? It is not for clicks, it is not to be sensational, it is because the forensic pattern is terrifyingly identical. And if we don't recognize it, we will repeat it. Look at the profile. Ara Zobayan, chief pilot, thousands of hours flight time, extremely confident. Knowing the terrain like the back of his hand. Retired airline captain, 20,000 hours, a career of safe flying. Both flew into marginal weather conditions, fog and mist that they likely felt they could handle. "I've done this 1,000 times" is the most dangerous sentence in aviation. Both men experienced a moment of confusion, and both aircraft, a state-of-the-art helicopter and a capable business jet, were flown into the ground under full power, with all systems working. The wreckage tells us that the machine did not betray the man. The man was betrayed by his own biology. This is the Kobe pattern. It is the tragedy of the high-time pilot. Sometimes having 20,000 hours is dangerous, because it convinces you that you can feel your way out of a cloud. It convinces you that your gut instinct is better than the artificial horizon. But the inner ear doesn't care how many hours you have logged. It lies to everyone equally. The rough engine might have been the distraction that started the chain. But the high-energy impact proves that the pilot was actively flying the plane until the very end. He was solving the wrong problem. He was fighting a climb that wasn't happening, while ignoring a dive that was. The NTSB preliminary report will be released soon, and when you read it or when the media summarizes it with catchy headlines, I want you to look deeper. Look for these keywords. Look for hot stretch on the filaments. Look for rotational bending on the turbines. Look for high energy impact in the crater analysis. These are the silent witnesses. They are the only ones left who can tell us the absolute truth. They will likely confirm that on that rainy morning in December, N257BW was a healthy bird. It had electricity, it had power, it had fuel. It just didn't have a pilot who knew which way was up. We wait for the official report to confirm the details. But the physics of the crash site are already speaking volumes to those who know how to listen. This wasn't a mechanical failure. It was a human tragedy. And the only way to honor the victims is to learn the lesson they left behind in the wreckage. Fly safe. Trust your instruments. This is the Air Debrief.